Okay, so today we're going to learn a little bit, a definition of the type of fish that we're going to be looking at during the survey. And the fish that we're looking at are diadromous fish. And broken up, that pretty much just means a cross-running fish or through-running fish. So fish that are moving between two different bodies of water, between freshwater and saltwater. So freshwater meaning ponds, streams, rivers, and saltwater obviously meaning the ocean. Okay, next slide. So there are two different types of diadromous fish. There's anadromous fish and catadromous fish. We're going to talk about anadromous fish first. So next slide. Next slide. And the type of, and anadromous means uprunning. So moving upwards. And these are fish that spend most of their lives in the ocean and migrate into freshwater streams, rivers to breed. And in our area, there are several examples of fish that do this. We have Atlantic salmon, striped bass, Atlantic sturgeon, and American shad. Next slide. But the survey and why you're all here today is going to be focusing on a certain type of anadromous fish. And the group of fish that we're going to be focusing on is river herring. And river herring is just a grouping of fish, two different types of fish. Alewife and blueback are considered river herring. And so in this survey, you will be looking for these fish. You will not have to tell the difference between the two fish. They look very similar, so it's very difficult to tell the difference, especially looking into the water. So, but they have some common characteristics. They show up about the same times in our streams. There's a slight difference with bluebacks arriving a little later, but they show up about the same time. They both have a forked tail. They're both about the same size, about 10 to 12 inches in size. They have a very shiny silvery sides to them and a very darkish, blackish greenish top. They do have this little dark dot kind of behind their gills, you can see. And the alewife have a little bit of a belly compared to the bluebacks. And these are the type of fish that we're looking for. So not big fish, but again, you've got these key characteristics that you're going to be looking for when you're going to monitor. Next slide. So a little bit of the life history of the fish. So the alewife range throughout the northeastern United States. You see the maps here. The alewife range and the blueback range overlap, with the bluebacks traveling a little further south than the alewifes. So alewifes will be found from about Newfoundland down to the Carolinas. Bluebacks can be found all the way down to Carolinas and into the Florida. Next slide. So during the winter time, the river herring are hanging out in the ocean, feeding and doing what river herring do. Next slide. And while they're in the ocean, they play a key part in the ocean food web. And we're going to mention food webs a lot in this presentation. So there are certain animals that rely on river herring for food. And here are some examples of some ocean animals that will be eating river herring, like cod, whales, dolphins, larger species. Next slide. So when the temperature starts to change and spring approaches, river herring start moving inland off the continental shelf into the rivers, into the estuaries throughout the northeastern United States that we showed you on the map before. Next slide. And as they move into our estuaries, and estuaries are places where freshwater and saltwater mix. So around Long Island, we have several estuaries, like the Long Island Sound, the Peconic Estuary, the South Shore Estuary, and even New York, New Jersey Harbor Estuary. So they start moving into those estuaries. And once again, they are part of a key food web. So they're going to be eaten by a number of other animals that they'll find in the estuaries, like seals, striped bass, that rely on these food sources in the late winter. Next slide. So as they're hanging out in the estuaries, they're waiting for temperature cues to signal them to start heading up into their freshwater systems. Remember, they're anadromous. They're moving from their saltwater bodies into the freshwater bodies to spawn. The cues, relying on temperature, we usually say about 48 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. They start to move into the river systems. And here's a nice aerial view of the Carbons River on the South Shore. Next slide. So the fish move inland, they're moving up these streams, and they are very fast moving fish. They're strong. They can move through fast moving currents. They can wiggle their bodies through rocks, as you can see in these pictures. There they go. But many people have seen fish moving to spawn, like Pacific salmon. Maybe on National Geographic, you might have seen these large salmon on the Pacific coast moving into streams, jumping these amazing jumps over these big rocks and boulders. And that is not what river herring do. They cannot jump like that. Even a small obstacle in a stream that's just 10 to 12 inches can impact the movement of an alewife or a blueback herring through the stream. And that piece of information is very important to remember as we move through the presentation, because that is going to impact their spawning success. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Next slide. So here we are once again, they're in a new water body, in a stream or a river, and they're again part of this key food web. Now they're in a food web, maybe where they're being fed on by a variety of birds. And I know there's a lot of probably birders on the call. So, you know, things like great blue herons, cormorants, several gulls will feed on river herring as they enter our streams during the late winter, early spring. And of course, osprey, the iconic osprey, we were just talking about that. A great indicator that river herring have returned to your stream. If you see a lot of diving in the water by an osprey and the osprey's returned, maybe river herring there. Good indicator. And they rely on these migrating fish this time of year for this food source, this high energy food source. Same with mammals. You're going to see our river otters on Long Island looking for river herring. And of course, raccoons are always interested in any type of food source that comes their way. So next slide. Okay, so once they've reached their freshwater location, the fish start to spawn. And so the females and the males, they'll fertilize the eggs, and we're going to see the eggs being laid, and then the adults will stay in the system for a few days after spawning, and then eventually they will leave the system. So again, not like, you know, National Geographic Pacific salmon, they don't spawn and die. These fish spawn and leave the system and will come back the next year. A really interesting thing about their life history is that they will return to their natal stream, the stream where they were an egg, year after year. So they're attracted to their natal stream. They may stray a little bit and go to a local stream, but they're really going to the same location year after year. So the eggs eggs are about 1 to 3 millimeters inside. They're very small. They hatch in about a few days. And then the young will stay in the system throughout the spring into the summer. And then there'll be another environmental cues to signal them to start heading out to the estuary and out to the ocean themselves. And again, life history of alewife, especially, they do not mature until about 3 to 5 years. So they will take about that long until they will come back to their natal stream. And so we always say that females can produce 60 to 100,000 eggs, which sounds like a lot. But when you have a life history where you don't mature until about 5 years old, you know, a lot of things can happen to these little fish in the ocean over 5 years. And we'll see some examples of that in the slide. So next slide. So we're concerned about them. And that's why we're all here today, because we're concerned about their population numbers. And we want to know more about them. And so one of the major impacts to river herring over time has been commercial fishing. And so large scale fishing, we're talking about, not rod and reel. We're talking about these large ships that go out with these big nets carrying behind them that could be several football fields in size. That type of fishing can really impact population numbers for river herring when they're out in the ocean. You can imagine you can see on the left-hand side, there's 2 ships pulling that gigantic net through the ocean. You can imagine if it runs through a big school of river herring, you know, you could decimate maybe even like a whole stream system's, you know, population. So this is why we're concerned. The river herring are not listed currently under the Endangered Species Act, and they're not state New York listed at the moment, although there is a no possession for them below the George Washington Bridge in New York State. So the population numbers are down, again, due to this overfishing. And you can see on the graph that's here from the late 1800s to the early 2000s, just a drop off in river herring over time for commercial fisheries. So this is a major impact to their populations, obviously, and why we don't see as many as we used to. Next slide. Another reason that we have this decline in alewife and bluebacks is this habitat loss. And so this is where kind of you will all come into play here. So the area of Long Island and Westchester, where we live, is dramatically changed. People have lived here for hundreds of years and have altered their environment. And that's what's true too about rivers. Many rivers in our area, pretty much most, have been altered. And one way to alter a river is to put a dam on it and to constrict the flow of the water. And so here's some examples and some pictures here of that being done. And of course, this was done for a purpose, and the purpose was to harness the energy of water. Water is powerful, water helps make things, right? So things like a mill on a dam to create a product was very important several hundred years ago. So here is an example. The top two photos is a dam on the Karls River, and you can see the dam on the left is a more recent photo of what it looks like. You can imagine that a dam like that would be impossible to get past for a alewife. The picture on the right is a historical photo from the same location of the mill that was there. So mills were placed to produce things like a grist mill to produce products for people. But of course, these dams don't serve a purpose for us today. On the bottom left-hand corner is another example of what dams were used for on Long Island. Here's in Calverton is people picking cranberries, so a cranberry bog, damming a river for that. On the bottom right-hand photo is a picture of an ice pond, so damming a river to collect ice. So this is a picture from Southampton. And on the South Shore of Long Island, there are many ice ponds created on rivers, but because, of course, people didn't have refrigeration years ago, and they needed to harvest ice during the winter. And then on the right-hand side, there's a chart of just the many different barriers located on one river system, the Karls River on Long Island. All of those barriers are not passable for fish like alewife. So you can imagine the impact that this has had to the populations of these fish. Next slide. So why do we care? Hopefully it's become very apparent from the presentation, but we care because there's ecological importance. So the fish play a key role in the ecology of all of these systems: ocean, estuary, river. These fish need to be there. They're at certain times of years, these fish have to be in certain locations to provide food for different animals in the environment. Next slide. And we care because of economic importance, obviously, because even, if you like to eat fish, if you like to recreate and go fishing, if ecotourism, there's a reason that these fish exist for food for other fish. So things like striped bass that people may like to catch and eat themselves rely on these fish. It's very important for our local economy. Next slide. And historical importance. And I think this is really key too, is that these fish played a key role in the people who lived here long before us. So the Native Americans relied on these fish, as well as early colonialists and people, even in just like the turn of the 1900s, these were key food sources for people. And you can imagine that if people, survive a very long and hard winter, and then all of a sudden in the late winter, early spring, they go to their local river and they see thousands of alewife that they can use for food, for fertilizer, for barter. It must have been miraculous. And so this plays a key history in our local, New England, Mid-Atlantic region, as far as our communities go. So I think it's important to remember that as well. Next slide. Okay, so now we're going to get back to the other diadromous fish that we're going to worry about in this survey, and that's catadromous fish. Next slide. The catadromous fish that you will be focusing on is the American eel. So now catadromous fish are down running. So these are fish that are doing the complete opposite life cycle of the alewife and the blueback. So they are living most of their life in fresh water, in streams and rivers, and they're migrating out to sea, the ocean, to breed. So they're doing the opposite to the alewife and the blueback. And these are just pictures of adult eels. So these are what they look like, which I think most people are familiar with, but we're gonna ask you to look for the juvenile eels. So next slide. Okay, so here's some more maps that we can look at. And on the left-hand side, you can see that the American eel can be found throughout a good portion of the United States, Mexico, Central America. So big, wide range of the river systems. And they have a very interesting, unique life cycle. So they start off as eggs, and then they become this larvae that floats into the ocean, and then they enter into the estuaries as glass eels. So they come in to our local areas, clear, no pigment, see-through eels. And as they enter the streams, they become pigmented and darker. They grow larger into these yellow eels, and then they become their full mature adult silver eels. These eels, once they become adults, can live in our streams and rivers for decades. And then at some point, they get a cue to head out to the ocean, to Sargasso Sea, and they all go there and they spawn and then they die. So they have a very dramatic life cycle, very unique, very mysterious. It was actually a really cool CBS Sunday morning special on American eels recently, which I highly recommend people watch, and even highlighted the Hudson River, New York State DEC crew and the monitoring work they do. And I think it's really worth watching, but yeah, really mysterious. Next slide. So here's some pictures of what they look like. So the top photo is glass eels. So glass eels with no pigment, you can see, very tiny. And then the bottom photo is, you see the starting of the pigmentation, all those little eels in that tank. And then just behind them, a nice alewife in there. So you get a shot of both that you're looking for. So that's what you would see. That bottom photo is the kind of eels you would see when you go out to monitor during the spring. And there's an alewife, that's what you would see too. So next slide. Okay, so with all that said, we're concerned about eels as well. The population numbers are down and they're, again, mysterious. We want to know more about them. So, we want you to look for river herring. We want you to look for American eels. So the question is, what are we doing about this and how are we helping the fish? The survey is one, but this is some of the other work that we're doing, the partners that Emily mentioned earlier. We're working hard to improve passage on these rivers in our local area. One of the things we've done is set up a Long Island diadromous fish work group made up of partners from state, federal, NGOs, academics, to discuss and plan out monitoring, research, restoration projects for these fish. Because there is things that we can do. If we know that herring and we know that eels are in the area, we can focus our efforts on raising money, planning projects to either remove dams, to take them out, or to install fish passage. So I just put in two examples in the slide of what fish passage could look like. The top photo is on the Peconic River in Riverhead, and that is a nature-like fishway. So it's an engineered fishway that looks like a stream, but it's totally engineered to allow fish to naturally move through the system. So take out the dam and put that in. The bottom right photo is a ladder type structure. It looks highly engineered, but the same idea. So the fish are heading to the dam, they enter the lower box of that structure, and inside they will find these baffles that create these water flow to allow the fish to move up and over the dam. It's literally like a ladder for the fish. So there's options to, if you can't take out the dam, that's not possible. We can actually create these really neat structures for fish to move over dams and into their spawning grounds. So we do have possible solutions to these problems. The good news is that we've put in over 10 fish passage projects on Long Island. I think there are 3 active fish passage projects right now going on Long Island. So that's very exciting. So yes, so it is possible. We've also created a Long Island diadromous fish restoration strategy guide where we highlight all of our priority fish passage sites. And we have this very interactive diadromous fish map, which we're going to use in the breakout session. So good stuff. So lots of good stuff. So next slide. And that plays right into the survey. So all of that work is supported by the work that the volunteers from the survey do every year. And like Emily said in the beginning, volunteers have led to these fish passage projects. We've had, every year we get about 50 to 100 citizen scientists participating in the surveys, which is wonderful. They cover 50 tributaries or more every year. And the volunteers alone, regular citizens like you, have gone out and found over 20 remnant runs of river herring. So they have found river herring that we did not know existed. Again, if we don't know that the fish are there, the practitioners can't work to restore the rivers. We can't justify it. We need to know if these fish are actually there. So the volunteers do this for us, which is, the survey is wonderful.
Vicki,
Next
can I
slide.
interrupt for a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is Byron. Your 20 plus is good. I think you could probably put that to 30 plus at this point.
Oh,
I
nice.
have 32 streams on my list where we've found remnant runs. And that's all around Long Island and Westchester County.
Well, clearly, yes, clearly I have to update these numbers. Yeah, it just keeps coming. I mean, I feel like every year we get a couple more streams from the volunteers. It's pretty phenomenal. So we can't have eyes on all the rivers, so we need all of your help. Thanks, Byron. Next slide. Okay, so here's the basics. Emily's going to go into the logistics of how to actually put the data in, but I'm going to go over what the survey is. So what this is, volunteers looking for river herring and eels during the spring season. The time period is about March 15th to May 15th in that window. It's all flexible depending on temperature. So that's the time period, but that's the chunk where we'd like people to go out to look. What's the goal? Simple goals. Are there river herring and eels where you're looking? When did you see them? About how many did you see? That's the three key pillars of the survey. There's other things we're going to ask you to put in, but that's really what we're looking for. Are they there? When did you see them? About how many? And now, so where are you going to look? We're going to send you, we're going to guide you, don't worry. We're going to guide you to the first impassable barrier on a stream or river. So that means the first dam, the first culvert, the first structure that makes it impossible for these fish to get past. We're going to send you there. Then when you get there, you're going to look below it because that's the section the fish can access. And you're going to look for the fish there. And I'll show you in a second, but it's going to be an area that's below the first dam. It's going to hopefully be clear and shallow and constricted. Next slide. What do you have to do? Well, it's a volunteer survey. We ask you to survey regular intervals, as often as you can. It'd be nice if you could go twice a week, but if you could do more, that's wonderful. Try to go when the visibility is good, when there's enough light to penetrate the water. But we do ask you to go at different tidal cycles, to go different times a day. Visit your site at different times because the fish, they can do different things at different locations. Some locations, the fish only move late in the day. Some locations, the fish only move early in the morning. Some only move at high tide. So you might want to try different times just to see what your site looks like. Again, you may be the only person monitoring that site, so you're the one who's going to know best. So try anything and see what you can do. When you get to the site, we ask you to spend at least 15 minutes looking in the water and around the banks of the river. You really should give yourself time, because if you just show up and you look and you don't see anything, you just look in the water, I don't see anything, nothing, zero. That's not enough time, because sometimes there might be a little bit of hints that they're there, or they might just be cryptic. They've evolved to be camouflaged. The dark top is good for hiding. They blend in well with the bottom of the river. So you got to give yourself, your eyes, a little time to adjust to look for fish. And you also want to scan the river banks and even maybe the trees to see if any predators might be watching the river. So next slide. So here's kind of like just some pictures of what you would be looking towards. So here's some dams on the left. So you're the star. So if you're the star, you're looking below the spillway, below the dam, because remember, the fish can't get past the dam. So you don't want to look in the impoundment above the dam. You don't want to look in the lake, what people call the lake. You don't want to look in that. You want to look below the spillway in the tidal section. That's where the fish will be stuck and circling. And the right-hand side is just an example on the South Shore Montauk Highway. If you live anywhere near Montauk Highway, you probably live within 10-minute drive of a dam. So, because Montauk Highway serves as a dam, most locations on any stream. But you want to look at the restriction, and you can see on that star, the pointing arrow is below where the impoundment is. You're not looking in the pond, you're looking in the tidal flow where the flow is coming out. Next slide.
Victoria?
Yes.
If I may mention that last
Yep.
flood flag you had on the Commons where the main dam is, that site is a little difficulty
Yes.
for people. They don't have access to that. I mean, they can, but it's a, you know, a 15-minute walk or 20-minute walk from where they have to park within the park. The best bet on that location would be the Montauk Bridge on Montauk Highway for them.
Yeah, thanks. That's not the best location for monitoring, but
That
I
would be the
just,
spot for them.
yeah, I just wanted to use it as an example, but yeah, you're right. There's certain spots that might not be best or might not be safe or might not be accessible. So we'll certainly direct everybody to the best option for them, for sure. Yeah, so, okay, so here's an example of the Massapequa River. Most of that dark area there are alewife. This is one of our largest river herring runs on Long Island. So your site that you will go to will likely never look like this. But we wanted to show you what a large river herring run could look like. Here you see a spillway. Again, you're the star. So you were standing in this viewpoint. You are looking down at the spillway below where the fish can't get past. That's where they all hang out. They're circling. They cannot go any further. So this is just an idea of what it would look like. Next
If I
slide.
may, I'm going to install another historical note. I've been here since the early 50s, and that's what the Commons looked like when the sunrise was just finished. It looked like that for alewives.
Wow. Good to know. So yeah, so what you're going to see is probably something more like the top photo. So maybe just a few fish, and that's what an alewife looks like from above. It's a very narrow, thin fish, darkish top, forked tail. You see that dot behind the gills, probably circling. But when you go to these sites, you're probably going to see some other fish that might be there. You might see carp, but you can tell from above, very different body shape, not the same. It's going to be acting differently as well. But next slide. Okay, so maybe you want to look in areas where the water might have a contrast in color, like some green underneath. And here you see those thin kind of slivers. Those are all alewife. So that's a good contrast there to kind of see them. But again, you want to adjust your eyes and wait for that to happen. Next slide. Some other imposters, camouflage here. You got some brook trout on the left. It's got some spots, fatter fish. The alewife are the thin, more wispy looking fish in the photo. Next slide. Big mistaken identity for us lately, the last few years, has been bunker or Atlantic menhaden. We've gotten a lot of reports that I've seen alewife. Please take a photo, part of the survey. We're encouraging people to take photos or video. Bunker is definitely hard to tell the difference between a bunker and alewife. They do have a forked tail. They look a little similar. They're going to show up in some of the same locations, but there are some key differences. The bunker will be actively feeding. They'll have their mouth open. They're going to be searching around for things. They'll have that yellowish tail part. So they're gonna have some key indicators. They're going to tip you off that this is not an alewife. But if you're ever confused, we encourage you with the survey to take photos and video and email us, put it in the database. But this is a misconception for many people. Next slide. And then, of course, look on the banks of the river. You're going to be looking for evidence. There might be carcasses of eaten alewife. You might see maybe a raccoon got to it first. So you might see some dead alewife on the side of the river. You might see some scales. You have some shiny scales, nice against the leaves. So that might be some evidence. Again, take a photo of it and share it with us. Next slide. This is just a video of what alewife would look like swimming underwater. I don't know if we can see if we can get them a little bit under there. It's a little blurry. So this is a large scale run again in the Massapequa River. So you would not be seeing this level of fish. You're likely, if you see fish, to see maybe a dozen, at the most maybe 100, something like that. But not thousands of fish, like in a situation. Okay, next slide. I think we'll move on past this one. Oh, this is a video that you guys did on the eels. So maybe we can see that real quick just to show what the eels look like. There we go. Yeah. See if we can get some in the, oh. Yep, so there they are swimming. They're hitting that kind of structure there. So you'd want to look at the edges of a dam or a seawall, wherever you're standing, and see if you can see those little guys swimming. All right, next slide. Okay, and then this is the basics for the survey. So Emily's going to jump into it, but again, it's just very simple information that you're recording: the river name, the site, your name, the date. You're going to put your start and end time. If you know the tidal stage, if you want to be adventurous and take the water temperature, good for you. Weather conditions, presence or absence of the animals, photos and notes. We've got our database links here and the QR code, but Emily's going to go over that. And we've got great information on the CTUC website all about these fish and the survey. And we've got our Facebook page that we encourage everybody to join. So Emily, take it away.
Thank you so much, Vicki. Okay, so I'm just going to take a minute here to share my screen. All right, can everyone see my phone okay?
Yes.
Good. Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to go over a couple different ways to access the River Herring survey. And I just want to note too that this is going to be the main way to access the full Long Island River Herring survey. As Vicki mentioned, there is a separate link and a separate survey to access the Westchester survey. And that link will also be on our River Herring monitoring protocol. So you can find that there as well. Okay. So first, what you want to do, a couple ways, like I said, to access the survey is one, you could just access it through our main website. So you'd go to the ctuc.org website, go to get involved. Under community science, you'd go to the River Herring and American Eel survey link. All right, this is going to be kind of your great page, your one-stop shop for a lot of questions and resources involving the River Herring and American Eel survey. We'll also put this recorded presentation on there as well. But basically, like I said, there's a couple different ways you can access the survey. One, it's actually embedded right within this page. So if you want to, you can actually, if you're out in the field or if you want to go observe and then come back to your house, you can input the information right here within our webpage and submit it that way. The second way to do it is actually by downloading and accessing it through the Survey123 field app. So the first step you would do with this is download the free Survey123 mobile app, and you can just type that in and search that through whatever app application you have. And this is basically what it's going to look like right there, the Survey123 app. Next, you would either scan this QR code, or if you go to the second instruction here, you would just click this link and it would bring you to a survey prompt. Now from this survey prompt here, you can go one or two ways. You can go two ways, I guess. You can open it in your browser. So that's kind of the same thing as on the survey on the CTUC website. So it's just going to be the survey kind of just in your main browser, maybe a little bit easier to see for folks. But the other way you can do it after you've downloaded the Survey123 app is to open it in the Survey123 field app link. So you just go to open, and then it'll bring you to the main homepage of the Survey123 app. An important thing to note here is you do not need an ArcGIS online account to get into the survey. All you would need to do is say continue without signing in. And it automatically uploaded the Survey123 River Herring and Eel survey onto the app. So it's all there for you. All right, so now we'll walk through the different questions we have on the app. First, we ask for your name, email, we ask which river or stream you're going to survey, and we really have most of them around Nassau County, Suffolk County, even some parts of the city on here. If you do not find a stream on here or you're not sure, you can always click other and you can write in your stream. This is another important point. Geolocation is a really important part of the survey because we want to know what part of the stream you're surveying in, and kind of the exact location where you're finding river herring. So automatically it should upload your location in here. So for the most part, if you look at the map and it looks like it's right and it looks like it represents where you are, then you should be fine. If it doesn't, there's a couple different things you can do. One, you want to make sure that your phone has on its geolocation services. This will make sure that your phone is actually accurately identifying where you are. Another way you can do it is actually going manually into the map. So basically you would just click the map and you would just move it around to say, okay, I'm over here. I'm observing right here. Okay, so this is where I'm observing. So basically you'd say, all right, that's good. Leave it as that. And you would just click yes. I just want to note a couple of the other buttons on here. The home button actually brings you to another part of the country, so you probably don't want to press that. The plus button will zoom in for you. The minus button will zoom out. And the little hashtag button with the circle in between will actually bring you to your exact location that your phone is identifying where you are. So again, that's geolocating your area. The little kind of different maps on top will actually show you where the base maps are. So if you're kind of confused and you want to look at the streets instead of like the aerial view, you can do that as well. Okay, so the next couple questions will ask you the date and time you're surveying. And then next will be the title stage. So for here as well, you can actually identify your location. So it'll bring you to the nearest, your nearest tidal gauge. So you can just click allow. So my nearest tidal gauge would be Amityville. So the last high tide was 3:05 p.m. and the next low tide is 9:30 p.m. So this is actually right now a falling tide. So basically, if you're going at a time where you're between a high tide and a low tide, the tide is falling. If you're going at a time when the between the low tide and the high tide, the tide is rising. If you're going at a time when you're kind of at the high tide or at the low tide, that is actually going to be a slack tide. So the water is actually like a little bit more calm and not really moving in one direction or the other. So then you can just click that link. Like I said, find where your local tide gauge is, find the timing, and then you can click which one it is, whether it's rising, falling, or slack. As Vicky mentioned, you can also put in the water temperature if you have like a little thermometer handy. We ask for the weather. So is it bright and clear? Is there some cloud cover? Is there a lot of cloud cover? Is it rainy? Things like that. The next ones are whether river herring are present, yes or no. How many river herring are there? And you can give us a guess, you can give us a range, you know, maybe just one, more than 1, 5, 20, anything along those lines. Same thing with American eels. Are American eels present? Yes or no? If so, how many? And again, you can give us an estimate. There were, you know, hundreds, or maybe there was only a few, like 5. Okay, are there any other species or evidence of other species present? So this is basically a section where you can write in whether you're seeing some of those other indicator species, as Vicky mentioned. So are you seeing herring gulls? Are you seeing ospreys? Are you seeing some other types of species that might identify that herring are present within the area? Also, we have these 3 different sections where you can upload photos, as Vicky was also mentioning. You know, we get some kind of mix-ups at times between bunker and alewife. So you're welcome to upload a photo if you see a fish and not sure exactly what it might be. So you're welcome to upload that. You're welcome to upload photos of, you know, like if there's an osprey in an area or a bird, or maybe there's scales. If you want to upload photos of scales or things like that, you're welcome to do that here. And then you're also welcome to type in this notes box, whether you see something else. You know, previously in previous years, we've gotten, you know, notes about people just seeing adult eels and seeing predated adult eels at different parts of streams. So we welcome that information. Anything else that you think is relevant for us to know, please feel free to write it in the notes section. So once you're done with the survey, then you basically just click this check mark and you'll be done. Obviously, I haven't really filled it out, so it's not going to go through. Another thing I'd like to show is that you can actually click this X here at the top corner, and this can close the survey. So either you can close and lose the changes, you can continue to survey, or you can even save it as drafts. So if for some reason your internet or you're having issues out in the field or something else, and you want to save the survey and finish it at another location, you're welcome to do that too. So you can just save it in the drafts. Okay, so I'm going to close the survey. And then I want to show everyone something else. So again, every time now that you want to go back into the Survey123 app, you can do that just by going to your phone, going to the app, continue without signing in. And then you have all your surveys you ever need right here on the app. And this is great because you don't have to keep going into the CTEC website and keep going to the link. It'll be right here automatically for you. And if you're familiar with any of our other surveys or any surveys from any of our partners, most of those you can upload and put right in here as well. So we have Batmap Long Island, Coyote Watch, Diamondback Terrapins. There's tons of different surveys that you can house all here at Survey123. So it's a great one-stop shop for you. Okay, so I will stop sharing now. All right, so next we're gonna go to our breakout rooms. So as we mentioned, everyone was previously put into the breakout rooms based on what you identified in the registration. However, if you'd like to go into a different breakout room, you can either stay behind in the main room when everyone goes into their breakout room, or you can write directly to one of us or to Ariel Santos. She'll be the one managing the breakout rooms, and just tell her which region you'd like to be in. Again, the regions are Long Island Sound Long Island Sound / North Shore / Westchester, East End, and then South Shore.
Emily, there is a question in the chat. I don't
Sure.
really understand the question, but it's from Deborah. She's asking about if someone is fishing for herring in the area. I don't know how their protocol, I don't understand the protocol.
You can,
The answer to that question is that there is no fishing allowed for river herring on Long Island. So if somebody is in a stream catching alewives, don't confront them. Just back out and get a hold of a local conservation officer because it's not allowed.
well, they can become a bycatch if you're fly fishing, but you can't keep them basically. You're not supposed to be fishing for them directly, but it can be caught if you're fishing for trout.
Yeah, thank you so much for both of that. Yeah,
And-
that's a really important thing to know, is that both river herring and American eels, you cannot catch them or fish for them on Long Island. So if you see anyone doing that activity, then you need to reach out to us or reach out to your, like you said, your local DEC conservation.
When did American eels get off on the list? As far as I know, you can catch them.
It's the juvenile eels, George.
Yeah,
Juvenile,
the
correct.
juvenile. Sorry, that's what I meant. And that's
Right,
what that's the main part of this survey.
Yeah.
Is what we're
American
looking
eel
for
under 9
juvenile.
inches are not allowed to be retained.
And,
Yes.
and two other quick notes, if I may. When they're out in the field, Polaroid glasses are an essential. You can mention that. okay?
Polarized. You mean polarized, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And also, if they have glass eels, and they can't, it's hard to see in the water, but what they have to look at is the rocks that are nearby on the edges. The eels have a tendency to just get the low flowing water, and you can see them actually crawling up the cement or the rocks. So they can pay attention to that if they have an impasse. Thank you.
All right. Yes. Thank you so much, everyone, for those additional notes. It's really helpful. All right. I think we are probably now ready to move in. And did anyone have anything else?
No, Emily, I just wanted to make sure that we don't have to do anything. You control the breakout rooms? Okay. Thanks.
Yep. So everyone will be automatically moved into the breakout rooms. So I think it sounds like we're ready to do that. So Ariel, when you're ready to go, feel free to send us into those breakout rooms.
All right, thanks. I'll send everyone in now.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so a couple different things that I'm just going to share in the chat. Make sure. All right, that first link you'll find is the survey protocol. And then the second link that I'll put in there is the South Shore Streams Guide. Okay, so those are going to be really two of the most helpful documents to folks throughout this survey process. The protocol kind of goes through everything we went through already in the presentation, gives you helpful tips on getting onto Survey123. All our contact information is on there as well. So if you want to reach out to any of us with questions or thoughts, you're welcome to do that. And then the South Shore Stream Survey Guide is going to give you some of our top priority sites that we want assistance with on the South Shore to monitor, as well as the best way to access some of those sites. Okay, and please feel free to jump in at any point while I'm kind of going over some of these resources with questions or thoughts. That's really the main purpose of the breakout room. All right, so next, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so next I wanted to show everyone how to access our river revival map. So this is going to be another really valuable resource when doing the River Herring and Eel survey. So basically what you're going to do is go to the wildlife conservation section of our website, again, ctuc.org, go to the river revival link, scroll down, and then you'll see the map kind of automatically populate into the page. You can find it's basically the same thing as you would find in a separate link. So you can move freely through the app, but sometimes I find that it's a little easier to open it up in a separate page. And all that you'd have to do that is click this link kind of icon on the side. You can copy the link by just copying to the clipboard, that little copy to clipboard icon, and then you would just open it up on the separate page. So let me make sure that everyone can still see that. Okay, so here we are on the River Revival map. And next, I kind of wanted to go over some of the different elements of the River Revival map. So we have pretty much every stream on Long Island labeled on here. When the stream is green, that means it's accessible. When it's red, that means it's inaccessible to river herring. Where you see a star means that it's a priority project site. And that means that there's a barrier there. There's a barrier, or that there's a fish passage project going in, or there's something happening there. With any of these icons, as you probably saw just pop up, you can click on the star, and on the side of the screen, it'll auto-populate with all the information. So this is a particular project that we've been working on at CTUC for a number of years at Belmore Creek. So we've been trying to look at different ways to install fish passage at Mill Pond at Belmore Creek. Also, when you see any of these little red icons, that means there's a dam there. And you can see there upwards of the upper reaches of Belmore Creek at Twin Lakes. That's an area called Seaman Pond Dam. It's interesting though, this is the New York DEC Allied Dams list, and sometimes they actually don't have the full thorough amount of dams on Long Island that you see here. So even though there's a star at this location, there is a dam here, but it's just not identified on the DEC list. So just to note that difference there. Also, another really important factor is where we found river herring in the past. So you can see this little fish icon kind of at the head of tide here, or the kind of entry point of each stream. And that means that we have found river herring there in the past, and, you know, hopefully presently. So that's what that little icon means. Now, what's interesting here too is you can see that at Massapequa Creek here, we actually do have a fish ladder installed at one of the dams. So this is identified as blue because the passage has been restored and river herring can now access that area of the stream. However, they can't access the upper reaches of Massapequa Creek. So that's why the remaining area is in red. All right. So now walking through some of kind of our priority sites and some of the sites that we could use some more help with, or that we just kind of want to point out. So Mill River is actually a really interesting site. We've had several volunteers there over the years to view the river herring run. It's been a decent size run over the years. And we're really thankful that this year they're actually putting in a fish passage there. So depending on when the fish passage is installed and put in, you may or may not see fish there because hopefully they're using the ladder. But we're probably more than likely going to have some other outreach type of activities around there. So if you're interested more in learning more about this new fish passage, stay tuned and please feel free to reach out to me. Also at Parsons Creek, this is an interesting creek as well because at certain tides, the whole creek is accessible. However, at certain tides, it's not accessible. So recently there's been a fish passage put in here at the second pond, Parsons Creek Lofts Pond area. And we could use help there. It's a very small fish passage, kind of more like a dip in the system. So you may see river herring using that. Enrico, I don't know if you wanted to jump in and talk any more about that one.
Yeah, Emily, it's actually not Lost Pond. There's a little sort of.
Oh, is it right here?
It might not be named there. It's called Caroline's Pond. It's in between Lofts and Silver Lake. So it's just upstream from Silver Lake. And it's.
Oh, so is it this one right here?
Yes.
Then?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Okay. Sorry about that. I thought it was the second one up here. Okay.
Yeah, so it's that little, there's a little ramp there that in the past that hasn't been passable. And now they have altered it and in theory it is passable for the first time. So it'll be interesting to see if they use it and get into that small impounded area upstream.
Great, thank you for that. I definitely wasn't sure quite where it was. So I'm glad. Thank you for the correction. Okay, some of the other kind of top sites that I mentioned, we could always use help at. Belmore Creek, as I mentioned, that's a very big project for us. There is no fish passage currently being installed there, so we could continue to use help there in identifying the river herring run. That one is also really easy to access. You just kind of park on Merrick Road and just the spillway is right there. So you just literally walk over to the pond right there, and that's where the spillway is to view. Similar thing with Massapequa Creek. Although there's a fish ladder there, there's a second dam actually to the other side of the fish ladder. And we have been curious at sometimes whether there are river herring going into that spillway instead of the one where there's a fish ladder. So if you live in that area, we could definitely continue to use help there. Also, looking upstream at Massapequa Creek, since we have the fish ladder in, we're always curious to see how far up some of these fish might be getting. So if you can access this area up here, we welcome, some observations in the upstream parts of Massapequa Creek as well.
Have you had any reports of fish going over that spillway? I mean, at the spillway, the ladder there? Any fish, reported up further north?
We had one report, if not last year, the year before, George, up at Sunrise Highway.
Okay.
But I wasn't able to confirm it. We didn't have any reports after that. It was apparently 4 or 5 fish. So, we have that whole lake and that whole stretch there marked in blue because technically it is reconnected and the fish can get up and into that. But, it doesn't mean that they are, and we don't really have a lot of proof that they're using that ladder and getting up there. So it would be nice to know if we get more eyes on that creek. There's a path up all the way up through there, and there's places you can access the creek, but you can also park right at Sunrise Highway on the westbound side and access the next dam at Massapequa Preserve, or walk across the highway and and look at the culvert as it goes under Sunrise. So there's some pretty good access points.
Yeah, some of the streams on kind of this area, the South Shore, are pretty easily accessible in terms of viewing. So that's really nice. Similar part of Jones River here is kind of an interesting site. You know, that's actually a town of Hempstead Park. So you can just go park in there and walk over to it. You just might have to let the town staff know what you're doing because it's kind of like into the park. But that's a really interesting and easy site to see as well. So definitely more eyes on there could always be helpful. Okay, kind of moving along now. Another really important site is Karls River and Argyle Lake in Babylon. So there is actually a fish ladder here as well, but we really don't know whether or not, again, it's that effective. So if you know kind of this area of Argyle's lakes, you know that there's those historical spillways there. And since there are like the spillways have a lot of attractant flow, so the water's coming down at a decent velocity, the river herring are actually quite attracted to that nature of water. So we don't know if that they're moving towards those spillways instead of the actual fish ladder. So more eyes on that are always helpful. And again, this is a relatively easy, accessible site. You know, a lot of people use this park to just walk around. So, you know, if you happen to find yourself in the area or you just want to park nearby and take a look, we could really use some input, eyes on that as well. And then again, since there is a fish ladder there, and if they are effectively using it, we could always have more information on how far they're getting upstream. So there's a couple different areas to do this. There's a dam at Southard's Pond, and there's a little kind of bridge here, a little part of the trail that you could easily look down to see if there's fish. But all along here as well, there's some easy spots to access to see if you might find some of the fish there. So some parking, and you know, you can kind of just look at the stream and see if you see anything. All right, Sumpawam's Creek is an interesting one as well. That actually was only recently discovered by a volunteer as part of the program, I think in 2020. We could definitely use more eyes in here as well. It's a little bit of a tricky earth site to get to, but not that bad. So you kind of just here, you have to park on like the edge or a side street and kind of walk over safely, but it's kind of a little bit of a busy area with cars. So you might just have to kind of keep an eye out. But there's a
Park at the
really,
diner.
yeah, or well, yeah, you could park at the diner and walk across, but again, there's like a lot of cars and not really a great way to get across, because I've looked at this site a couple times. That's why I usually like to park on a side street and then walk over, because there's more of like a path.
Right.
But there you can see that there's this little kind of concrete pond here, which is a great space to see like anything. So if you're going to see anything, it's really easy to see it in here. So it's definitely an easy place to spot anything if you're going to see it. Okay. Moving down a little bit. We also, you know, would love some extra help in kind of the Iceland Bay shore area. You know, we have some evidence that river herring are using some of these streams and even getting in and accessing some of these streams, but we don't have a lot of great info. Some of these sites are a little bit harder to access, but some of them have some easier access spots. So for instance, at Aurora Creek right here, there's this McDonald's right here that you kind of easily park at and take a look at the stream pretty quickly right there. So that might be an interesting survey site for anyone in the area. But if you know of anyone who lives in the area or can have access to some of these other streams, you know, either through this one right here is kind of within the Islip School District area. Some of these are running through private homes and private property. So if you know with anyone with a little better access to some of those sites and can kind of take a look, we, you know, more than welcome some help there as well. Okay, moving along. So the Connectquat River is another big part of the priority projects that we've been working on. So actually over right here, a tributary of the Connectquat River is Westbrook Pond. What used to be a pond, it's now just kind of like Westbrook. So the dam actually failed here back in the summer of 2019, which opened up and restored access to this entire protected tributary of the Connectquat River. We could always use help here in
Alright.
identifying river herring or other species of fish or others that are actually using the site. It would be super valuable. The only thing here is, again, a little trickier to access. So we used to be able to park kind of on the side road and walk in. You can't really do that now. The police will probably, or other traffic cops will ticket you. So what we do recommend is that you can park within kind of the Connectquat Park system. If you just tell them that you're volunteer monitoring there, and then you can actually walk down and over. There's a trail system here, and then there's a little walkway you can walk down and underneath a tunnel and you can walk around the front of where that spillway is and view the river herring there if there is any. So we could always use more eyes on this system as well. And any other parts too of the Connectquat branches, like, you know, if you fish a lot, you know, we definitely welcome people who do that. There's a lot of, I know, people that fish along this area. So if you keep an eye out for river herring through that, we more than welcome that, encourage that. Okay. So some other spots that we could definitely use help is in the Patchogue area. We do have some evidence that there has been river herring runs there for a number of years. Actually, I think this is accessible. I think this portion of it, but we do have evidence that there are river herring using these systems. A couple of the ones that we want to point out include Patchogue River. So we're looking at possibly doing a project here in the future. There's a whole new like reworking of the road here in a relatively accessible, let me see if I can turn off the stream systems for a minute. Oh, there we go. Relatively like accessible little part of the park here. So you might be able to easily view whether there's fish here. Also, if you happen to be a patron of Blue Point Brewery, there's a part of the stream here you can look at and see if the river herring are coming up into this portion of the stream. And if they are, then they're actually going to be moving up and into the culvert and into Patchogue Lake that way. Okay. Another interesting project in Patchogue is actually there is a nature-like fish tray right now being constructed at Swan Lake. So I'm not sure, I think that might be paused for a little bit, but hopefully when that's constructed, that would actually be a great way for fish to just get up and through the system into the upper reaches of Swan River. So we're really excited about that project. All right. Carmen's River as well is a really great site. As Vicki was kind of showing some pictures, right at Hards Lake Dam here, there is a fish ladder, but sometimes we do have people that either they're kind of, you know, patrons of the park or using the park or kayaking or whatnot that take a look at that dam for us and let us know whether they see fish, river herring using the fish ladder, and that's always super helpful. There's also a number of other dams through this system that are also getting potentially upgraded with fish passage. So there's a small dam here at South Haven Park that's possibly getting upgraded with fish passage. And then up here at Lower Lake, they're also installing fish passage there as well. So some exciting updates there. And then another huge portion of the South Shore that we really don't have a lot of data on is kind of the southeastern part of Suffolk County here. We could definitely use more help and eyes on this area if you happen to live near here. This is really interesting, actually, the Torrell River. We just had an observation here for the first time, I believe, in, I think 2020 as well, either 2020 or 2021. So again, that just shows, you know, how big of an impact volunteers can have on this program and our efforts. And there's a lot more info too on all these streams and kind of interesting and helpful ways to access them. Also, just to know, if we move further out east, there's some other kind of interesting small streams as well that see, you know, a good presence of river herring. So Taylor Creek right here, that sees river herring probably each year, as well as Mill Creek up here in Mecox Bay as well. So if you happen to be in these areas and want to keep an eye on those streams or streams in the adjacent areas, you're more than welcome that. Okay, so I know that was a lot of information and kind of a quick run through, but does anyone have any questions about kind of streams in their area or stream in your neighborhood?
A question, Browns River. Which
Yeah.
is in, is anything being done with that? Because we had a meeting yesterday and I know they're dredging it now, not the river itself, but the mouth of it, they're dredging. Is there anything being reported on that? Browns River?
No, not that I know of. We have historically had, some sightings of river herring there,
Yeah, Browns
but
River,
it's
yeah.
kind of been slim in the past few years. We haven't really gotten any observations there. So yeah, I don't think that there is any projects currently in the works at Browns River is so tricky because this is one of the rivers that just has so many different barriers. You can just see evidenced from these maps. So it's a really tricky site if you were going to try to put any type of passage in.
All right.
I don't know that we've had a report there in 10 years, George. So I don't know what, we don't really know much about the status.
All right, well, I'm going to have to leave because we have something to go to, but I'm going to be trying to expand my areas of going out. It's been a hell of a, I don't drive that much, but I'm going to try to hit some more spots this year if I can, okay? And hopefully.
Sounds great.
All right, okay, I'm going to check out. Take care,
Great.
guys.
Thanks,
Great
George.
presentation, all right?
Thanks so much.
Best,
See you
stay
soon.
well.
You too.
Okay, I'm going to log out.
Brown. That's where. This is Montauk, right?
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions or thoughts about any of these streams? Rico, anything that I missed that you kind of want to touch on?
No, I think you got the key ones. I mean, there's potentially fish in a lot of places still that we haven't found. So, I think any eyes on any system really is worthwhile, and we just never know. So.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. If there's any on here that I didn't mention, it doesn't mean that it's not worth surveying. Definitely. And there's a lot too that we just don't send volunteers to because we don't have the best access. However, if you live within that stream area or have better access to it, we more than welcome, those observations. Like, for example, right kind of in my own backyard, let me see if I can get to it. Right here at Amityville Creek, there's not really a lot of great observation opportunities there because most of this creek is within neighborhoods and kind of like private land and ownership. And so some creeks are like that, not too many, but some are. So, if you happen to be a resident or know someone who, is within a resident of some of those streams and can observe there, that's always helpful too.
Is anybody on the call that's new to the survey and hasn't done it and doesn't really have an idea of where to start? Okay, all seasoned pros. That's good.
Yes, yeah, I see George Dahl just jumped in. Thanks, George, and mentioned that him and George Costa have been monitoring Browns River at Lotus Lake in 2020 and unfortunately saw no fish. So
yeah.
I've gone looking on Tut Hill Creek. I live right there, and I saw lots of bunker, but I don't think I've successfully spotted any alewife.
Yeah, the other thing I would say, Emily, is that if you were surveying last year and the year before, they were really two down years, not just on Long Island but coast-wide. Especially last year. Last year was just a really off year, it seemed. So. If you're, one of the things we struggle with this survey is that people, get frustrated of not seeing anything and lose interest. That's understandable. But, every year brings the promise of stronger runs. So, encourage you to, even sites that you've been disappointed by in the past, it's worth taking another look this year. And, if you don't want to go too many times, maybe wait until, mid-April or late April. That's when, the chances are better.
Yeah, and you might even spot, like you said, other valuable things to note, or you might spot like American eels. You know, we're really big in trying to improve their access to habitat. So even if you're not seeing much river herring, you know, if you're seeing eels, that's great to note too. And like we were showing before, I mean, there's sites where we didn't know that there were river herring, but volunteers found them even recently, you know, like the site in Babylon and the Turrell River. So you never know where one might pop up. Yeah, and another note too on the bunker, that's a good reminder as well. Unfortunately, last year there was a big bunker die-off, and we were kind of getting a lot of confusion on whether they were an alewife die-off or a bunker die-off. And if you do see dying fish, you can, you know, more than welcome to take a picture of that too, because the DEC often likes to track that information. So, like Vicky was saying, please feel free to reach out to us if you're not sure what something is and whether it's a bunker or alewife, or if it's dying or acting a little funny. Please feel free to send that info to us too.
I'd also just encourage folks to, it's been stated many times, but to really try and do the 15 minutes. Especially with the eels, the glass eels can be very difficult to spot because of their lack of pigment and the size. But I have been fortunate enough to find some, but you got to look.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Sally. Yeah, that's a good point too. It is important to stay there and be committed for those 15 minutes, because it can get a little boring if you're just like sitting and staring at a stream for that long. But you are more likely to find something, I would think, the longer sometimes you look more carefully, and if you want to look at different angles. And we haven't quite talked about this too, but there isn't a lot of systems where I found more stuff at night. So if you can do that safely, maybe, you know, with a friend or someone in your household or something, and you want to take a flashlight and flash it into the stream, I've actually found sometimes more stuff that way. So like I said, if you can do that safely in an area that's easily accessible and safe, and you're with someone, you could definitely try that out too.
Thanks, Emily.
All right. Well, if there's no other questions, we're actually just kind of a little over the 6:30 mark. So I think you have already my email in that protocol sheet, but please feel free to reach out to me, to any of the other contacts on there if you have questions or thoughts or questions on a survey site or whatnot. You know, we're more than happy to kind of help anyone out with this if they're a little, you know, confused or wondering, or talk to you about what you're seeing, or even help you with Survey123 or anything like that. So please feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
Thanks, Emily.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Enrico, any last thoughts?
Nope, just thanks everybody for your help.
Yeah, thank you so much. We really always appreciate our volunteers as part of our project. Like we said, it really does, this project really makes an impact. So thank you.